Come for our miles of pristine beaches and vibrant art scenes. Stay for our diverse cultural experiences. Plan your trip now, Miami and MiamiBeach.com. Welcome to the Leading with Audacious Confidence podcast. Our mission for the show is to support leaders who are climbing that ladder of success with warnings, practical tips, and techniques from leadership experts to highlight not just what it takes to be a leader in this age, but in the process, build your confidence to show up more powerfully in your role. I'm your host, Alicia Khoury, founder and CEO of Audacious Concepts, Inc., a boutique consulting firm providing audacious solutions to nagging and persistent people issues clogging the revenue pipeline of your organization. From optimizing talent to reducing conflict and improving communication, our brain science, people data tools, and expert coaching help you find the elegant solution to get the job done with more ease and less stress. Now, let's join in on the conversation. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad you're back with us here on another episode of Leading with Audacious Confidence. I'm your host, Alicia Khoury, and today I have with me a very special guest. I've known this woman for a couple years now. She is phenomenal. And so let me share with you a little bit about Colleen Hauk. Colleen is a sought-after workplace dynamics expert and keynote speaker. She is the founder and CEO of the Corporate Refinery, a consulting and training firm that works with some of the world's largest companies to forge new paradigms for women and what leadership really means for today's world. Colleen's passion grew from her 15 years as a corporate executive, where she experienced firsthand the negative effects of poor leadership and lack of self-care. After suffering her own breaking point, she transformed her personal circumstances and inspired others across the organization to impact cultural change. Colleen is the co-author of 2 books, including the bestseller, Women Who Ignite. She's a multiple-time contributor to Forbes and delivered her keynotes and trainings to Fortune 500 companies and organizations such as Pfizer, Dell, Merck, Panasonic, and New York Life. Welcome to the podcast, Colleen.
Oh, I'm so excited to finally be here, Alicia. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first of all, in your bio, we talked about your 15-year experience as a corporate executive. Take us back to that, where you felt like you had to do it all and it led you down the wrong path. So share with us a little bit about your experience.
Yes. So I was, I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity to work at one company within those 15 years for nearly 12. And it was an amazing group of people, just, high performers all the way around. And it was an industry when I first came in, I had never worked in that industry. So I fought really, really hard in those early years to learn everything I could and just prove myself. So I was able to pretty quickly rise into formal leadership role.
Can I just interrupt you just for a second? And I want you to define for me high performance, because we hear that term a lot. So when you say you have a high performing team, what did that look like?
Oh, goodness. That's such a great question. And it's funny because the company I worked for just before that, it was very much a different group of people. So high performing, first of all, meaning just very independent, not needing to have a lot of external motivators coming in, just people who really wanted to show up and do their best. And granted, I worked in sales, so it's a little bit of a different culture and a different personality type when you're in sales. But with that said, that the company I worked for previously, it was also in a sales role, but the caliber of people were different. That group needed, again, those kind of external motivators. And it was
Hmm.
a younger a sales type person, a little more green, versus this group, tended to have more tenure, a little more sophistication, showed up and just wanted to deliver the best, whether that was the best experience for their clients, create a culture of collaboration. So I would say, though, the leading thing for high performers that I can call out is just this desire, intrinsic desire to be their best.
Gotcha. All
Yeah.
right, good. Now that we have that framework, that baseline of what you
Yeah.
mean by high performing, let's continue.
Yes. So that's what I was surrounded by, was literally a group of people who intrinsically wanted to be their best. And that aligned for me. That's how I was raised. I grew up very much that same way.
Mhm.
So from a culture standpoint, I fit in well in that organization and rose into an official, people manager leadership role. Well, going into 2013, I received another promotion to the next level of leadership. And I accepted this position with a little bit of blinders on. It met my professional and my financial goals, but I really wasn't taking time to evaluate how it might impact me personally and all the other, my health and all of the other ways. So I went into 2013 and spent the next year doing nothing but working. I mean, literally, Alicia, I was sleeping about 4 or 5 hours every night. At the time, we had 3 young kids at home. I was an awful, awful wife and mom. Just everything was revolving around work, if you will. And finally, at the end of 2013, so like I said, a year into it, I just finally broke down. And I thought that my only option was to quit my job if I wanted to save myself or my family.
Mm.
Fortunately, I didn't. I ended up hiring a coach and got things sorted out. Ironically, ended up getting promoted again at that same company. And I stayed there for 4 more years in an even greater, in terms of
Role.
responsibility and revenue, greater leadership role. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's usually a lot of people reach that crossroads where they're like, well, it's either this or my family. And, it's a hard choice to have to make, but you don't have to make that kind of choice. You need, go through the coaching process first, like find someone to support you, because that's really what you're missing. You're missing the support to help you
Yes.
understand where the blinders are that you're not seeing.
Absolutely. I, there was 2 things for me. One, I didn't acknowledge at the beginning. I thought, you know what, this is just what it takes to be a high performing leader, right?
Yeah.
Like this is so I love, it's so funny, Alicia. I love that you asked me what high performers looked like. However, what I'm now going to say is that oftentimes high performers internally think it means I've got to work extra hard. I need to work late. I'm going to feel this constant stress and anxiety, and I've got to push, 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 right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what you tend to believe. And so that's what I thought early on is, oh, well, this is just normal. This is what it takes to be a high performer, without acknowledging that, okay, whoa, let's back up a little bit, right? That certainly there are some aspects of being, having resiliency and persevering,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. But to what point is it too much?
Yeah.
And then when you get to the too much part, when you start to suffer that burnout, in fact, you become less of a high performer,
Mm-hmm.
and less of a good leader when you're burned out. I will say that, I showed up. People had no idea. Nobody in my office, definitely not on my team, had any clue what I was going through. I mean, I joke that, I was showing up like a rock star every day,
Yeah.
oh,
But
4 hours of
mentally,
sleep, no problem. I'm going to, rock this meeting or this client presentation. Nobody had a clue.
and that's one of the dangers is nobody stops to ask, are you okay?
Hmm.
Is everything okay? And even if they do ask, you lie.
Yeah.
Right? Of
Yeah.
course I'm okay. Because you don't
I
want to lose your
definitely,
job.
I definitely even exactly, Alicia, I did not want to say anything because I believed I was the only one who was
Mhm.
remotely going through this. I was
Right.
surrounded by amazing, I'm going to say peers and then upper leadership. And so I didn't dare say anything. I didn't really have senior leadership. My direct manager was not the type of leader that would have asked, very much an old school leader that
Mhm.
today, now through the corporate refinery, we try
Yeah.
to shift those paradigms.
Right.
But
Because I was just
even
that was my next question, but keep going.
Yeah, but even if I had been asked, I would not have shared. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until I was in burnout recovery that in 2014 where I felt comfortable standing in the doorway of a colleague's office one morning, and I just started to share with her what had been going on the year
Mm.
prior. And it's so funny because she just sat there staring at me, and all of a sudden I caught myself like, oh my gosh, is she going to run and tell my boss or anybody
Mhm.
else what's been going on? And so I stopped talking, and she said, I am so sorry that I'm just staring at you. She says, but I just had the exact same conversation over the weekend.
Mm.
And it was really for me a year later into recovery that I realized I definitely wasn't alone as,
As you
especially as a
thought.
leader going through that.
Yeah. And that's where the paradigm shift needs to happen. Not just asking the question, but ask more specific questions like, how much sleep did you get last night? Not like, how are you doing? That's too general. That's easy to brush over and say, I'm good. I'm fine.
Mhm.
I'm great. Things are great. But like, how much sleep did you get last night
Well,
and the night
one
before?
Absolutely. And so one of the things, there's two things I would say. One is that as we work through the corporate refinery to shift paradigms, right? It is number one about leading with humanity and
Mhm.
acknowledging that people are human beings and that they have different experiences and things that are happening, whether it's, they're not sleeping because there's a family issue or health issues, right? We have to acknowledge that
Yeah.
we're working with human beings. But the second thing that came out of that is a six-step process that I did as a leader, and I now train in
Mhm.
through our leadership trainings on how to have these effective one-on-ones. And one of the questions, Alicia, is to be asking on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling personally? And it allows those people who maybe, if you work, let's say traditional like engineering, or people who are more scientific
Mhm.
database, who don't want to necessarily share their feelings, they can
Yes.
just choose a number, and it allows the leader to at least just know, okay, this is where they're at, like just from an awareness standpoint. And then for those who do want to share, it just allows the leader to pause and open up the space if they'd like to share the details of, oh yeah, I'm not doing great because I only slept 4 hours last night, or
Mhm.
whatever it may be.
Yeah. And then take the next necessary step. That still brings in psychological safety so people don't feel like they're going to be targeted or fired or something for expressing a challenge that they're having, but allow them to know that they're there. We are here for you, and they don't have to feel the stigma of, now I'm going to be the weak link on the team.
Yes, yes. I love that you brought up about psychological safety because it's one of the fundamental things. And one of the best ways for a leader to build that safety is themselves sharing challenges that they've gone through, revealing some of that vulnerability. Now, look, I'm not about just dumping problems on people. In fact, I had a leader early in my corporate years who I'll never forget. It was my first corporate job. I had actually gone from being an elementary school teacher into the
Mhm.
corporate world. So I was excited. I had to wear a suit, and
Yeah.
this is back in the 90s where you had to wear nylons and closed-toed
Yes.
shoes. And I'm feeling so,
So
professional.
grown up. So
It's so
grown up.
grown up. Yes. And I'll never forget, my manager took me into the boardroom. Oh my goodness. And I'm like, oh, we're going to have an official meeting. And the only thing that happened was her literally dumping onto me all of these challenges that were happening in the office. And she was crying. And I was like mortified. And so that is not that is not a way to develop psychological safety or be vulnerable, right? So we want to have intent and purpose, but that is a mistake that I made when I was going through burnout. Is I did not reveal any like inkling of challenges for my to my team, and it actually did my team a disservice, quite frankly.
Yeah, talk into that a little bit more. How did hiding the struggles you were going through do your team a disservice, in your
Mhm.
opinion?
So one would be exactly what we were talking about, is that I didn't provide a space. So if they were themselves also feeling, frustrated or suffering from burnout, whatever it may be, I may have said, "Hey, my door is always open." I may have said those things,
Mhm.
but I didn't provide a really safe place by demonstrating myself. So that was the first thing. And then secondly is, if you're a great leader, your team members should want your job at some point, right? And you should be working to develop them into your job. And I actually had an individual team member who he really did want to move into my position. And in hindsight, I realized I wasn't demonstrating for him truly some of the challenges that I was facing in that position. Now, granted, working, the amount I did and sleeping 4 hours, that was not a requirement. That was my
That was
own
your
choice.
choice.
That was my choice. I'll be really clear on that. That was my mistake. However, there were certain aspects that I could have shared that led to some of my, uncertainty or, questioning. And I did him a disservice by not modeling what some of the challenges were as a leader if he wanted to move into my position.
Right. And also allowing them to step up in that role to support. Like, why are you doing so much to that point? We're here. Give us more stuff to do, like spread it out amongst all of us. We can all do it instead of you feeling like you had to do it all because you were the rock star, right?
Yeah, that's such a great point. I remember this teammate of mine, my direct report. We were traveling together. It was about a year after the burnout happened, and so now by this point, I'm now telling people all about it. And he said, "Colleen, I had no idea." And he said exactly that, Alicia. If I would have known, I would have done that. I would have stepped up here, created this, or supported you here.
Hmm.
And I didn't. I did not reach out. I had not only I look back and I know part of it was a sense of control, right? It's
Hmm.
not that I didn't trust my team members. It's just it was a sense of control for myself. And also, it was such a big promotion. I felt like I still had to
You
prove
need to
that
prove
I
that
could do it, right?
yeah, that you
And
belong there.
that's you being able to do it is not about you being able to do it as an individual contributor. More so, showing you can do it in a leadership role is your ability to guide and lead, and part of that comes with delegation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why I love doing this podcast, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about leadership, and you're just sharing that you had this idea that I had to do it to prove that I belonged in this leadership role, make sure that the higher ups can see that they made a good decision by putting me here, without really understanding what leadership truly means and what confidence in your leadership means. Confidence in your leadership is not about, look at how much I can do and have a, good attitude and show up on time and do all this stuff. Meanwhile, everything around me is crumbling, but I look
Mhm.
great and
Yeah.
I'm doing great and I'm doing the work. It's about, how are you developing people? How are you allowing them to step up into the role, not doing everything yourself? Because if you continue to do everything yourself, it's like raising children. If you do everything for them, they're never going to develop the skill to do it themselves. And then when they become adults, they don't know what to do
Yeah. Yeah.
because you've done
You're
everything for them.
as a leader, you're actually stifling their development. And so, that was 2013 that I did
Mhm.
that. And I can so thankfully say that I learned a lot from that experience and continue to really take ownership of my own leadership development.
Mhm.
And one of my proudest achievements was about 2 years later, when 4 of my 5 direct reports were promoted. I wasn't promoted again that year, but 4 of my 5 direct reports were. I will tell you, Alicia, I received more congratulatory emails
Mm.
from colleagues about that was such an acknowledgement of my leadership skills,
Yep.
that they were promoted, and not necessarily if I was promoted or not.
Yes.
And it took me some I had to grow up a little bit as a leader. And look, I train on
Because
this
we're not
now.
born with all of these skills.
No, and absolutely not. And this is part of our leadership training, especially when we are working with high potential or emerging new leaders. Is look, it's not it's not crazy that this happens, because all of your promotions through the early years of your career were based upon what you delivered as an individual
Merit.
contributor.
Your merit.
So now you're promoted into leadership, and we're asking you to stop doing what you've been doing for a decade,
Yeah.
however long you were an individual. Like, oh, forget all of those things that got you promoted in the past and now do something totally different. It's like, it's trying to break a decade-long habit. So
Hmm.
it's not unlikely. It's not bad. It's just, if we can get right, like that's a goal of ours, is to get our hands on high potential leaders so they learn this early on,
Yes.
so they don't make the same mistakes,
They
right?
don't burn
That young.
out, kick people out, blow people out,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
like blow up themselves,
Yep.
all
Exactly.
the things.
Exactly.
It's training, it's development, and a lot of, I think the paradigm around that is starting to shift a little bit. I don't think enough of it. I think people are still promoting people in certain industries without giving them the tools to actually succeed in the role, and just expecting them that by osmosis, by title, you're supposed to know. Just because now you have this title, you're supposed to know what to do. It doesn't work like that.
No, there was actually a Harvard Business Review study that showed that on average, there's a 9-year gap between the time someone's promoted into official people leader role until they actually receive leadership training. And
Wow.
yet, what, nearly 40% of people quit because their managers are awful. It's like, okay, no wonder there's this 9-year gap. What are, we're setting up everyone for failure when that's
Wow.
happening. So I
I had
agree with you.
never,
There is a
yeah.
bit of a shift to see. But man, we try to get in there really early and actually do leadership training for everyone,
Mhm.
because we all have
Yeah.
to be self leaders, right? And this
Leadership
is what
starts from the individual contributor all the way around, all the way up.
absolutely. And the more, this aligns for your podcast, the more that you've got those leadership skills early on, the more you're going to lead with confidence, because you've
Confidence.
got them before you're even put in that position.
100%. Yes. Build the ark before you need it.
Yes. Yes.
And just like you said, a couple of podcast interviews ago, someone said, you're not really a leader unless you have created leaders. So you may
Hmm.
have the title of a leader, but when you start creating leaders, that's when you are really a leader. So when you start getting other people who are on your team promoted, based on how you've coached them, how you've nurtured them, how you've created a path for their growth, then you can consider yourself a leader. And that's probably why you got so many congratulatory emails, because
Yes.
it's like, yes, she's arrived into the club.
Right.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, I will tell you all the things that I thought were um proved to me I was a good leader in terms of early accolades, promotions, raises, right? All those things that you receive early on. It's like, oh, that means I must be a great leader. I'm getting all of these things. And it wasn't until not only having those other, my team members being promoted, but also other larger challenges that forced me to like release anything about me and only focus on the betterment of the team, even if at times it meant it might sacrifice something I was doing. Now, I would never sacrifice my values or, the integrity, nothing along those lines, but maybe just my satisfaction with something, or something may have just been more challenging for me personally, but I knew if I could push through, it's going to be for the betterment of the team. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until those kinds of challenges, the promotions of my team members, that I really acknowledged, okay, this is what leadership looks like, not the promotions, the raises, the other accolades. That was the arrival of leadership, right? It was the arrival, but it
Yeah.
certainly wasn't saying you're a great leader. Absolutely not.
Yeah. So what aren't leaders focusing on right now, or what is something that they're they need to be paying more attention to that they're not paying attention to right now, as you're working, in the industry now, looking ahead? into 2023 and beyond,
Mhm.
what aren't people paying enough attention to?
Yes. So I think they're paying attention to this, but it's how they want to solve for it, I think, is where the challenge is. So they're paying attention to the fact that we are in this hybrid environment and there are so many leaders. I mean, literally, I think I had 3 or 4 calls with leaders just in the last couple of weeks, all centered around this challenge of we are in hybrid and I want to bring people back into the office. But I know we can't do that all the time. And so now, how do I get the camaraderie? How do I get the collaboration?
Mhm.
Microsoft Trend Report just came out talking about this productivity paranoia that leaders are having. That workers,
People
employees
from
are
home
saying, "I
aren't going
feel
to be.
really productive at home," but managers are feeling like, "Well, I don't see it, so I
Mhm.
don't think you are productive." So now they're using technology to track productivity, and it's like it's insanity, right? So that's everybody I feel like is pretty much in that same place. It's the how. And I'm going to tell you time and time again, almost any question anybody asks me on how could we solve this? How could we solve that? The answer is always communication. It just is. So what leaders need to be paying attention to is the ways in which they're communicating, the ways in which they're having conversations. You know, oftentimes leaders think, well, yeah, I have these regular check-ins with
Mhm.
my team members. And it's like, well, are those check-ins on productivity alone, or are we actually having real conversations? Are you asking the right questions? Are you exactly what you said, Alicia? Are you providing psychological safety? Are we doing all of the things as human beings, as social beings that we are, to actually create the collaboration,
Mhm.
camaraderie, productivity, effectiveness? So it's about how the communication is taking place, what it looks like, when it's being delivered, how it's happening. That's what we are really focused on, and seems to be the gap for a lot of organizations.
Wow. You're so right. Absolutely. Communication, it's not the tool, it's not the, what's the latest app that we can use. It is the techniques. How does this person best communicate? Do I understand their communication styles? Can I really understand over Zoom or over some other, whether it's text platform, whether it's Slack or however, am I really understanding what they're saying? Am I catching? Because in a, in a, a text or a Slack, you're missing tone, you're missing all these other things. Like how do we gather all of that? So it's about learning how to do deeper communication. How
Absolutely.
do you use a lot of assessment tools to help teams and help leaders understand each other as we're talking about communication?
Yes, I mean, it depends on what the overarching challenge is. So while assessment tools absolutely can be a really good foundation, it really is just everybody needing to learn a majority of the soft skills. And even the leaders who are reaching out to us, they themselves need that refresher. And they need the refresher not because they're not good communicators necessarily. They need the refresher because now they have to utilize their skills in a different environment, in a different
Mm-hmm.
way, multi-generational, right? Across
Mm-hmm.
diverse ethnicities and backgrounds. So the communication, the actual training and the coaching is still going to be the most effective. So the assessments are a great place to start, just to get us grounded.
Mm-hmm.
But if no, even if we don't do assessments for whatever the reasons are, the training itself, the conversations, the rehearsal, it's so funny how, people, I get it. I come from sales. They wanted you to role play, and it was like the most embarrassing thing, but how much you can learn from being in role playing and rehearsing.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah.
really for us comes down to the whole entire learning experience is what's going to
Mhm.
drive the needle for them.
Yeah. So do you work in your practice mostly with women, or is it both women and men? How have you found the difference in working with them?
Yes. So interestingly enough for me, because when I started this business, it was centered around my personal story of burnout and really with a passion behind showing primarily women, because women tend to, and it's statistically proven that women tend to do more in terms of full-time work plus house care, child care, all of those things. So they tend to burn out more easily. So starting off, absolutely tend to, and I still get asked to speak primarily, or not primarily, but most often at women's conferences, leadership around women. However, what's so funny is when we're brought in to work with teams, it's not women. It is meant for men and women, because we're training on communication and how to show frontline employees what high performance looks like in a healthy way, right? In a
Mhm.
way that is advantageous for them professionally and personally, that still delivers results for the team and the organization. So uh, we do both, but a lot of where I speak at tends to be more female forward.
Mhm. Because you're a powerful female exec that's now running your own company, successful
Thanks,
business. So
Alicia.
definitely. How was
Yeah.
that shift though? How was that shift as we're talking about confidence and leadership? How was that making that shift from corporate into CEO of your own business
Mm-hmm.
mindset?
Uh, yes, mindset. So I feel very, very blessed in this regard that I come from sales. And so, as you know, as a CEO, a lot of what you do, especially in the early years of your own business, is sales.
Yeah.
So I was able to bring in this mindset of not taking things personally. So
Mhm.
reaching out, trying to, pitch myself to speak at a conference or, pitch our training workshops. I know not to take it personally, but it's because I came from a sales background. And so, if there's any CEOs here listening, that's a lot of the hard battle early on for CEOs or entrepreneurs is, look, it's not personal.
Yeah, it
So
definitely is. If they
yeah,
come from corporate environment where they had budget and they had all this other stuff
yeah,
available, and then now it's like, oh, I have to make that decision on my own. I
yes, yes.
have to
And
look at my own budget and see if I could do this. I'm not getting a budget to work
right, right. And I will say in the first probably 18 months of that transition, the other part for me was this mindset of like, oh, I work 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Like those were the hours I tended to work. Again, I was in sales, so there was some
with.
flexibility, but for me, those were the hours I tried to
Yeah.
traditionally keep. So it was this whole thought of like, I haven't started my day yet. It's, 7:15 and I need to, and it was like, well, wait a minute. It's not about the hours. It's how am I being most effective in my bit? What
Mhm.
does my business need right now? How do I be most effective? And quite frankly, those are all principles we should apply even in corporate world, but
Yes.
I get it. Not all corporate structures are that way today. But yeah, it was a lot of transition from just like habits I had, how I structured my day and what my own expectations of myself were that I needed to
Mhm.
change. Mhm.
Because as an entrepreneur, you can easily get burnt out too.
I would say there is higher rates of burnout among entrepreneurs, more so than corporate, because it's all
You're
you. I mean, it
responsible for
really is all
everything.
you at the
Mhm.
beginning until you start to build, a team. So it's setting up some boundaries, and it's really challenging depending on, the financial state that you're in and any of those pressures.
And the
Burnout is
support around you.
definitely. Mhm.
Mhm. So what made you make that decision to jump ship? Well, I don't want to say it like that, but to transition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I didn't necessarily have it on my radar. When I was still in my corporate job, I was starting to share my story because I really, literally that moment with in the doorway of a colleague's office made me realize, wow, okay, I'm being selfish if I don't share my story and the strategies I was learning. So I just started doing that, but I didn't have this like, oh, in 5 years or 10
Yeah,
years, I'm going to launch this business. It wasn't really there for me. I loved my job. I actually worked at a really great company. I had amazing colleagues. But
sounded that
there
way.
came a time that I was one of the first round of 50 positions that were eliminated. And I was offered my same role on another team, but at that time I just said, okay, this is the universe telling me it is time to make that transition. And
Mm.
so I happily accepted severance from my company. They were very gracious in what they were offering, and I took that severance and really just dove full time into my business. And it was scary. I cried a lot in those first 18 months. I admittedly cried a lot. It was the first time since I had been, 17 years old that I didn't have like a regular paycheck coming in and, where's the money? It was very scary. But I was blessed that I had a good support team and was able to do it.
So in that vein,
Mhm.
what advice do you have then for anyone who is starting up their business? Maybe they did get a severance and they're like, okay, this is an opportunity to start my business. Would you advise mindset coaching, business coaching? What is, like, if you had to give someone advice, what
Mhm.
would you share with them?
Yes, yes. Yeah. So regardless of how they've made the transition, I definitely recommend business coaching. If you're going to hire for coaching, business coaching, absolutely. I mean, I still have a business coach myself. And I do business coaching for small businesses, but I still have a coach.
Yes.
So absolutely
Coaching
having
is
that.
so important. Mentoring and
It
coaching. Oh,
it is. It is. But I would say, oftentimes when you launch a business, you start to go like, I have this new thing, which means all my strategies need to be new. I see this over and over again. And my piece of advice is, well, how did you build your career? And how did you grow these other things in your life? And go back and think about those, because oftentimes it's leveraging your own personal strengths. But the
mhm.
second thing is it's probably leveraging your connections, your market. And so we often forget when we make the transition, we believe everybody knows, like for example, I could easily say, oh, when I left that company of 12 years, everybody knew the exact business I was launching. They had no idea. They don't know what I'm doing. Am I a speaker? Am I a coach, a trainer? They didn't know. So I really encourage people, just reach out to your warm market, your current contacts, and you're not soliciting business from them, but just, hey,
Letting them know
this is
what
what
you're
I'm
up to.
doing now. Like, just let them know this is what I'm doing now. Do you know somebody who may be interested in this? So it's when you become that entrepreneur, don't ditch everything from the past. Like, lean into this stuff, your strengths, your strategies, and your network to begin with.
Oh, that's awesome advice, because it's so we see this all the time, right? We see this
Yeah.
all the time where someone comes out of corporate and feel like their experiences in corporate don't translate to being a business owner. Like, some of the wins, the big things that they did, the budgets they managed, the clients that they landed, all the great things that they did to get all the stars and all the recognition and all the stuff in corporate no longer has value or is valid, because now
Right.
I'm an entrepreneur and I got to start everything all over and I have no experience in this
Yep.
and I don't know what I'm doing. You have 25 years of experience or 15 years of experience doing the exact same thing,
Yes.
just under
My
the umbrella of a company.
Yes, I remember my business coach at the very beginning, the one that I had, because I launched my business initially just speaking. Like, that
Yeah.
was my business. I was a speaker. And every time we'd get on a call, I would say, well, as a new speaker, she's like, "Oh my gosh, Colleen, you have been in sales for 15 years and you were a teacher before that and you do group exercise. Like, you've been a speaker for 20, 25 years. Like, stop saying you're a new speaker, but it's true. So I give that advice, Alicia, because I didn't do that when I
Right.
started. I
Exactly.
took most things from scratch. I didn't do a good job of letting people know. It wasn't until about a year in where I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so we don't think our skills are translatable. So that's, I
Mhm.
think that's a huge mistake. And that really drains your confidence, because if you start looking at, well, how can I take this and use it? Because I'm going to use it anyway, but how can I highlight this as a strength of mine or as a skill of mine, or take my experience from this and put it over here, just like what your coach said. And sometimes you need someone on the outside to really help you see those things because they become major blind spots. And then just like you said, reach out to people and say, hey, I don't know if you know what I'm up to now. I'm no longer at this company. I'm now have my own business and we do this and this and this. I'd love to sit down with you and share some more, or, just so you have a framework. If someone comes across and you get, even as salespeople, you get embarrassed or somehow, scared to talk to people about what you're up to. It's like, they don't want to know. They don't care.
But isn't it funny, because you wouldn't have that problem if you went to coffee with someone and you were talking about your corporate job. You would just be talking about what you do. It's the same thing. It's like, it doesn't have to
put all this, we put all these false limiting beliefs around everything, all these paradigms. That's the word I was looking for, because a paradigm is a belief that you've adopted that didn't come from you. It came from who knows where. And we have all these belief systems around how we're supposed to be now as an entrepreneur and how we're supposed to be in corporate, and the two shall never cross paths.
Right. Yeah. It's like, when you're sitting down to talk with someone, you're just talking about your company, like the same way you would have if you were working as an employee for that company. Don't feel like you have to have this sales hat on or this marketing hat. Just be a human being and talk about what you're doing. Like, it's the same thing. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So we're going to jump into rapid fire now.
All right.
Are you ready?
I think so. I think so.
Okay. I think we've talked about some of this before, but you can reiterate it if unless you think of something else. But what was the biggest leadership mistake you ever made or was the victim of? I think we talked about one that you made by not sharing, but was there something that you were a victim of that you can?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a full story for another day, another podcast episode, Alicia. But as a leader, I actually was a victim of bullying. I didn't recognize that that's what it was. I was bullied for nearly 9 months by my direct manager. And what became revealed to me during that time is that this person had been bullying other people for his 15-year tenure, including many of my direct reports. And I mentioned earlier, as we were talking about how not only did I find what made me a good leader once my direct reports were promoted, but the challenges I faced where I had to make some sacrifices in order to support my team. This specifically was one of them. It was really, truly where the easiest thing for me to have done in those 9 months was to have quit. But once I found out very early on in my bullying personal experience, I found out early on how many other people, current employees and past employees, had been affected. I really said, I can't leave until this situation is resolved, whatever the resolution was to look like.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a major, major challenge. I mean, I was going through therapy. It was really, really rough.
Wow. I'm sorry about that.
You know what? It made
you a better leader.
It made me a good leader. It made me, I now have a leadership story that I can share and lessons from that. So I don't regret or, feel bad about what happened. I'm not saying I'm happy about it.
Yeah. But you're taking it and using it productively, right?
Absolutely.
You're not sitting in victim mode. You're empowering other people through the story.
Exactly.
So what's the best leadership advice that you've ever got that you still implement today?
Oh, that's easy for me. I'm an extrovert. I love to help people solve problems. If you come to me with a problem, I'm like all ready to, the solution wants to jump out of my mouth. I talk a lot. So I went to, and this was at that company I was at for 12 years. I went to a leader who looked the complete opposite of me, very reserved, tended to be more of an introvert, but I knew everybody loved working for him. And so his biggest piece of advice to me was always stay curious. And for me, how I took that away was to stop offering advice right away, stop always having the solution, sit back, be quiet, and ask more questions. So
Mm.
that's actually part of our leadership training, is how to lead with curiosity. And I owe that to this past leader. So yeah, leading with curiosity, asking questions is more often a way to be a great leader and have them self-discover the
Yeah.
solution versus you offering the advice.
And always stay curious. I love that, because I think that's why I do all these shows that I do, because I stay curious about everything and everyone.
Bravo to you, Alicia. Bravo. Yes. Yes.
So here's a fun one. So if you were a castaway on a deserted island and you can only have three things, what would you hope washed up ashore or was airdropped to you, and one cannot be a cell phone?
Okay.
You
Got
wouldn't,
it.
there's no cell towers anyway, so you wouldn't be able to
Okay.
reach anybody.
One would be my whole family.
Okay.
That
We
would
could
be
take
the
it as a
first
whole.
thing.
All right.
They're all together,
They're all
airdropped in
washed
one.
up on the same. Yep.
Yep. My family, my any which way, whatever this looks like for me to still be able to work out. So like body combat and body pump are my favorite. So combat I can do by myself. So I'll say washed up would be some kind of like weights, barbell with some weights would wash up. And then the last thing would be chocolate chip cookies.
All right. I was thinking for the weights, you could probably take a branch and some coconuts and
Possibly. It's not the same though as having the actual equipment
iron,
that I
as
need.
having iron in your hands. Yeah.
Exactly.
All
Yeah, yeah.
right. I love it. Okay. So if you were a song or song title that is out there in the world, a song, what would it be and why?
Oh gosh. Okay, so this is the hardest one for me because I'm not a music person.
Ah,
Um, so but I will tell you, my walk-up song is Unstoppable
by Sia.
by Sia.
Mhm.
And so I'll just say that that would
Yeah,
be
just Sia.
it. And it's that even though I understand and recognize how to not get burned out, I still live from this place of being unstoppable. That and it's unstoppable with everything. I talk
Because
in
you
my
have a drive.
yeah, it's still
You have a strong
there.
drive. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, when I talk about confidence, Alicia, it's not about having all the answers, right? It's
Mhm.
about having that belief that you have the resources to figure it out. And to me, that aligns with being unstoppable. Like I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to have this confidence that I'm not going to fail. Like I am going to fail, but I'm going to have the resources. I'm going to be unstoppable and
Yeah.
figure it out. So yeah.
Because it's about, well, not just resilience, but knowing who you are. When you know yourself and you know, I can overcome that. Okay, I'm gonna fall flat on my face, or I've fallen flat on my face. I can get back up. I've gained the tools and the knowledge and the resources, like you were saying, because drive doesn't go away. High performance doesn't go away. It's there
I
with you.
hope not.
Yeah,
I
it's
hope
there with
not.
you. If you have it, it's there with you. And so you have to just now learn how to use it in a positive way and not let it become dysfunctional in your life.
Yes.
That's the key, making sure that it does not become dysfunctional. All right. My final question for this rapid fire is, what book are you reading right now? Or you can give us your top three favorite titles.
So I'll tell you, and I'm have to look over to the right to make sure I quote the title correctly. The one right now that I'm still reading is called The No Club, and it's really around the notion.
N-O?
No, yep, the No
N-O,
Club.
the No Club. Right.
Hmm. And this is really focused on the notion of that we get sucked into what's called non-promotable tasks, NPTs. And it's the one thing that we have really found in our most recent research that is a leading cause of burnout. So, you know, saying yes to NPTs, like things that anybody else could be doing, things NPTs are, things that don't drive toward the overall organization's mission or objectives.
Mhm.
And it's tasks that you're doing that are not contributing directly to your promotion. And what happens is, and this definitely it resonates with everyone, but primarily women. because the data has found that managers are 50% more likely to ask women to take on NPTs. However, women are also 50% more likely to say yes,
raise their hand for it
when they're asked. So we've been doing a lot of work around just building awareness on this concept. I just spoke in November at a women's conference, 700 attendees, and I asked them to raise their hand if they've heard of non-promotable tasks. It was less than 1% of the audience. So I'm just trying to take some of the research from the No Club. These women have done an amazing job of doing some early studies and interviews, and really just educate people. In fact, one of the women reached out to me after that conference, and she said, after listening to that, I went through, she did a diagnostic to see how much of her work was actually promote worthy versus non-promotable. And she took it to her boss. She and her boss, so communication,
right.
Uncovered that about 80% of it was non-promotable, and her boss supported her in figuring out how to start moving those things off of her plate. So what happens is we know we want to get promoted, so we got to do the things that'll get us promoted, but we don't know how to get rid of these non-promotable tasks. So now we just work more hours, and that's what obviously we've got too much work, right? So it's a leading cause of burnout. So that's my book, and that's the NPTs, Alicia, if I'm going to leave kind of
wow, that is amazing. That's amazing. Who is that book by?
I can't see it from here.
All right, we'll look it up.
Yes,
no, we'll
please.
look it up, and we'll have it in the show notes, and we'll have it everywhere so people can know. That's a great book to read, especially for women in leadership. And that's a great place. I was going to ask you finally what your book was about. You could share that too, or if you want to leave it on the NPTs, because that is huge.
Yeah,
that's a mic drop.
Let's leave it on NPTs to know that my book is my story of burnout. And I will tell you, if I knew about NPTs back then, I probably wouldn't have had that story in that book. That's what I'll tell you.
There we go. And that's it. Well, thank you so much, Colleen, for joining us and sharing so openly, so candidly. I'm convinced that this episode is going to help so many people recognize and become aware of some of the things that they're doing so that they can change or shift in how they're leading, and especially around the NPTs, because that I have to now go through my list of stuff and see what I'm doing I shouldn't be doing. So thank you all for joining us. And I just want to say, continue to lead yourself, lead your teams, and lead your organization with audacious confidence. And we'll see you on another episode of Leading with Audacious Confidence. Goodbye, everyone.